My name is Jim Manning, and I'm the author of Patriotism, Unhinged, available worldwide through online retailers. Next, I'd like to show you some of the people that I'm familiar with and friendly with, or if they're not still with us, that I enjoyed the time I spent with them. The first one is Dr. Cyril Wecht. Dr. Cyril Wecht, a wonderful lawyer, a wonderful doctor, both. More than most people, when Mr. Wecht had something to say, you better listen, because he's always on point. He passed away recently, and the world lost a great man. This picture is of him and I on a dais of a symposium on the Kennedy assassination.
Let's get to it. And let's see all of those sequestered records, those obfuscated reports, those missing documents, the x-rays and the photographs that were recorded but somehow are not around. Let's go back to November 22nd, 1963. Let's see who's responsible for the morass that exists. Let's see who is at fault for the problems that remain with us. Is it the critic researchers, those of us who are gathered here tonight? Were we responsible for the selection of two pathologists, Humes and Boswell, who had never done a single gunshot wound autopsy in their entire careers, to do the post-mortem examination on our president? I am repulsed by that, just as a citizen of America, and admittedly perhaps more so as a forensic pathologist. My former chief, Russell Fisher, Milton Halpern in New York, Geoffrey Mann in Virginia, Joe Spellman in Philadelphia, Alan Moritz in Cleveland, Dick Ford in Boston. These are the people that were the giants in their field. They lectured at the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology. When I was in the Air Force, my chief sent me there knowing of my interest and plans to go into forensic pathology. They were used by the government back through and following World War II. Every one of them was excluded because they shared the same deficiency, the flaw that was in common amongst their ranks. They were civilians. To call in two people who had never done a gunshot wound autopsy to do this autopsy, yes, they brought in Pierre Fink as an afterthought, an Army man in the naval setting arriving an hour late, and Pierre, the one person that I did know personally, a very decent guy. Pierre was largely limited to military-type stuff over in Vietnam, reviewing the cases. He had very little hands-on experience, and they did not do autopsies at the AFIP. And when Pierre had the audacity to open up his mouth, and he asked, and I can close my eyes, I wasn't there, but I never picked up this punctilious Swiss gentleman, and he said in that crisp tone of his, "Who is in charge here?" And a gruff voice from the audience came forward and said, "I am. Just proceed, doctor." 4-star admirals and generals in the room that night, 36-40 people. That was a scientific endeavor. It was a controlled military operation. That's what it was. And who was responsible for that?
Next is a picture of Buell Frazier. And Buell Frazier was the fellow that took Lee Harvey Oswald to work on the day of the assassination, the fellow who had the brown paper wrapped package in the back seat of his car, the fellow that went through hell on that day too because they tried to tie him to the assassination. He fought them tooth and nail. A nicer guy you'd never want to meet.
There was a tremendous amount of people that day on the sidewalk. The sidewalk out here is pretty wide, but I mean, they were just like, excuse the expression, like sardines in a can. There wasn't any room. I mean, if someone passed out, they would never hit the concrete. There's so many people. So they had gone down to see if they could find out what actually was going on. Well, I stood on the steps for a few short time, and then I said, well, I'm going to go see if I can find Billy and Mr. Shelley. So I go start down that way, and out in front of this building here used to be angle parking. And so I was somewhere down in the area of the angle parking there, and I was walking along, and I looked up, and there was a man with a rifle. I was terrified. Stop and think, what actually happened there 58 years ago today, that's a crime of the century. It's never been solved. So I saw this man. This man was not a policeman. He was not a detective. If you could have seen the type of clothing he was wearing that day, this guy was a professional, all the way down to his shoes. His shoes probably cost several $100s. And back then, in 1963, not many people wore shoes or in that price range. His clothing was such much greater quality. I talked to my friend Jim Lavelle about that. Jim Lavelle had a new suit he wore the day they was transporting Lee from the city jail, the headquarters, down to the city jail here.
That suit is downstairs on display on the 6th floor right now.
Yes. So he and I talked about the clothing, and I told him, I said, you know, that's something that I always admired, was clothing. But the attire this man wore, starting off with his fedora, they don't tell him what the hat cost. His clothing, he was immaculate. This guy was a pro. He looked at me, and the look he had on his face was a cold look. He wasn't scared. He knew exactly what he was doing. And I was so scared, he probably thought I could remember my name. And at that time, I probably couldn't have. But he puts the rifle in the back seat of his car. He's parked out at the angle parking. And he closes the trunk and goes to open the door on his car. I turn around and I walk slowly back toward the front entrance of the Texas School Book Depository. I was so scared. What I had witnessed that day and that time, I did see it. But if you'd have asked me 10 minutes later, I would have told you I didn't see anything.
We have a picture here of Beverly Oliver, also known as the Babushka Lady. And Beverly, a sweet, sweet person. I've talked with Beverly many times. There were people that said that this is not the same lady. However, she's convinced me that she is a lady. The CIA and the propaganda department, they could come up with anything. They said that she had a camera that wasn't even made yet, or all this bullshit. She is a very nice person. Next, we have a picture of Judith Berry Baker, who was the very good close friend and lover at the time of Lee Harvey Oswald, who at that time was separated from Marina Oswald. She has spent most of her life trying to explain away these ridiculous claims that Lee Harvey Oswald was a lone shooter. She spent a lot of her own money and time, and just a wonderful lady. Had an opportunity to speak at one of her symposiums, and she was very happy to get the data that I had. The next person is probably the highest official involved in the assassination review, Doug Horn, who was in charge at one time of the Assassinations Record Review Board, ARRB. And I had dinner with him last November in Dallas, and he was interested in speaking with me because of my book. And he asked me some specific questions about how shooting is done in the Marine Corps in boot camp, and what's the process, and so on and so forth. And we had some very interesting conversations. He still has a very high interest in the case. If I'm right, I probably won't be around, but this is all going to come out eventually, because it can't be a secret forever.
The one source that I know will assist you in digesting this part of my presentation is the DVD called Image of an Assassination. It was commissioned and paid for by the Zapruder family before they turned over the copyright to the film to the Sixth Floor Museum. So in 1998, this DVD, Image of an Assassination, was released. It's still for sale, and it consists of first-generation images made from the extant film in the archives by the LMH company, the Zapruder family, in 1997. The DVD was sold a year later. They took first-generation copies of each frame, digitized them, and then reassembled them as a motion picture. So this tool is one way where you can easily access any specific frame numbers that I might mention. Now, the images in that DVD, many of them are subject to a high contrast buildup. The contrast has been played with, and many of them are a bit darker than perhaps they should be, and some of the color has been brightened up. And so it's not an exact copy of what's in the archives, but for our purposes, for the purposes of this discussion, that is one of the many tools you could use to access any frame numbers that I refer to in this presentation. So let's move on now and talk about the Z film. Now, I've concluded that the famous Zapruder home movie appears to be an altered film, not the authentic out-of-camera original. The Zapruder film is admittedly the hottest topic within the JFK research community, so you are going to get my own personal conclusions about the status of this film based on my 3 years of work with the Assassination Records Review Board, where I was the point person for all Zapruder film matters, and based on additional study that I've conducted during the decade following the shutdown of the Review Board. So without any further ado, these are the things about the film that I believe have been altered. The true exit wound in the right rear of the head has been crudely blacked out. I would encourage anyone who has access to the film to look at frame 317. And the large head wound seen in the right front and top of the head may be nothing but artwork. In fact, it has to be artwork because it's entirely inconsistent with the wound seen at Parkland Hospital in Dallas, Texas. Now, we've been discussing the wound seen at Parkland Hospital, and in fact, the wound seen right after President Kennedy arrived at Bethesda by many people. And none of those people described any damage to the top of the head or to the right side of the head, forward of the right ear. And yet in the Zapruder film, that's the only damage you see. You see the right rear of the head blacked out. In fact, the entire rear of the head blacked out, severely blacked out, with darkness that's almost D-max, it's so dark. And you see a massive wound on the top of the head and a large wound on the right side of the head, which look very, very similar, but not exactly the same as the autopsy photographs we've been looking at.
Casey Quinlan is a college professor. He's a person who you can see the drive in him. I've been in his presence quite a bit. He always comes up with something new. I really enjoy him.
As a researcher during the years 2016 to 2021, this is where the brunt of my research, information, documentation on the murder of President Kennedy was headed. I was looking into Operation Pathfinder. The murder of JFK in Dallas appears to emanate from a document dated September 25th, 1963, detailing a meeting of the Joint Chiefs of Staff who were briefed by CIA official Desmond Fitzgerald on covert operations against Fidel Castro in Cuba, known as the Pathfinder operation. Chairing the Joint Chiefs meeting was Air Force Chief of Staff General Curtis LeMay. Now, the Pathfinder operation and the CIA Pathfinder files cut right to the heart of the matter, where the plots to kill Castro coincide with what we believe occurred in Dealey Plaza. The Dealey Plaza project, that's what I deemed it as, though its significance wasn't recognized when we first learned about Pathfinder. However, Malcolm Blunt, who has spent more time roaming the JFK records collection at the National Archives than anyone, first provided Bill Kelly with the Pathfinder documents he uncovered. Larry Hancock was one of the first to run down this alley and wrote about it in his book, Someone Would Have Talked. Bill Turner, former FBI agent, said, "We now know what happened at Dealey Plaza to a fairly good degree of certainty. The motives were piling up. The Bay of Pigs, the Cuban Missile Crisis, Vietnam, the two-track back channel to Cuba, the motives were piling up to the point where they, and I always come up with that pronoun, they had to assassinate him. I think it's now pretty obvious with the information we have today that the mechanism of it came out of the alliance between the CIA and the mafia. They, the U.S. military intelligence, already had an assassination apparatus set up for killing Castro, and they just switched targets and they killed JFK instead." Now that's from Bill Turner. Narrowing down the plot was the specific plan to kill Castro that was redirected to JFK at Dealey Plaza. We can eliminate the poisons, the bazookas, the bombs, and the poison pens and concentrate only on those contingency plans to kill Castro that utilized high-powered rifles to shoot Castro as he drove in an open car, just as JFK was killed.
Now, Robert Groden has dedicated his life to solving this problem. What you might not know about Robert is that he's outside of the Texas School Book Depository in Dealey Plaza most days, and he is speaking to people who ask questions, and he is selling some books that have a tremendous amount of information in them. He was a photographer, and he has published a number of books with his photos in them. Also, in a strange way, he was responsible for the Zapruder film coming to life. He was able to get a copy of it, and that was the first time that the people of the United States got to see the Zapruder film. And it was on a television show, a nightly television news show. He's been arrested out in Dealey Plaza. They try to keep him from doing what he does. I think he's been arrested like 60 times or something, and finally the judge wouldn't let them arrest him anymore. Very interesting guy.
The president was shot on my 18th birthday, November 22nd, 1963, and I'd always been fascinated by questions of history. I just gravitated to this one immediately, and I've been doing it now for 49 years.
What have you done? Obviously, High Treason, I assume, is a book about the assassination, perhaps?
High Treason, The Killing of a President, The Search for Lee Harvey Oswald, the new one, JFK Absolute Proof, just constantly dealing with new things as they come out. I was staff photographic consultant to the House Select Committee on Assassinations for 3 years, Oliver Stone's chief consultant on the movie JFK, and on like that. The Kennedy assassination has been my a whole adult life from the time I was 18 years old until now. And I've lately been fighting a war against the city of Dallas in Texas for the fact that they're trying to shut researchers up. They do not want there to be any mention of assassinations or conspiracy. So it's something that I've been fighting for quite some time and shows no sign of going away.
What do you believe happened to the president that day?
The president was shot in a crossfire. He was hit by more than one shooter. Beyond that, we don't really know all that much because so much false evidence has been put out there. What I do know is that when I worked for the House Assassinations Committee, I actually interviewed the Dallas doctors. And all in all, between the doctors and other eyewitnesses, we have 88 witnesses. 88, every one of which said the president was shot from the right front. Of course, the Texas School Book Depository, where Lee Harvey Oswald was supposed to be shooting from, was behind and to the right. So we do have a serious problem with the legitimacy of the evidence itself.
These people are all great researchers. very interested, that were involved in the case for a long time. A friend of mine that I really admire is from Massachusetts, Ed Tatro. I probably wouldn't have wrote this book except for Ed, because I had wrote the book because I wanted to exonerate Lee Harvey Oswald after seeing that he never qualified with a rifle, where they had taken that out of his record book and apparently made up another one. And then the one they took out, it befuddles me that they didn't destroy it, but they put it away in that section that I found it in.
One must not only evaluate the credibility of the witness telling the event, one must also question the integrity of those who are judging the aforesaid witness. There is a fallacy entitled selected preference, the selecting of evidence or testimony which supports a previously determined answer or desired result. If the judge harbors a hidden agenda or possesses a belief contrary to the testimony of the witness, the judge will seek all kinds of rhetoric, all kinds of spin, and all kinds of manipulation to attempt to discredit the witness and the account, which would otherwise undermine the judge's previous beliefs and conclusions. The Warren Commission and the 9/11 Commission are ideal government case studies for avoiding the truth and anyone or anything providing glimpses of it. Many lawyers are masters of fallacies and misdirection and red herrings. Their job is to win, not necessarily determine truth or justice. The same can be said for many individuals who will never admit that they are wrong about a particular issue. Henry Winkler's The Fawns could only utter, "I was wrong, I was wrong," okay? But he could never finish the phrase. There are plenty of organizations and political writers and talking heads who are guilty of Fonzie's tragic flaw. But please be assured that fallacies, although illogical in some fashion, are very effective unless the audience is very well educated and possess the acumen of a critical thinker. And Winston Churchill once said, the best case against democracy, the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter.
I guess I could go on for a long time, because it's been a long time that I worked on this, and I pretty much know everybody that does this kind of thing. It's a shame that we can't give the names and show the work of so many people that have done this thing for their whole lifetimes. But someday it'll all come out. People here and people who are still here, people that are resting elsewhere, will know that they contributed to getting the truth out.